They act like they don't care. But the truth is, they notice. The silence hits them. Your absence unsettles them. They thought you'd always chase. But when you stop, they panic in ways you'll never see. And their next move reveals everything about their fear of closeness. The shock of your silence. They never expected it. Not from you. Not after the way things have always gone. For so long, the rhythm was predictable. You reached out. You explained. You apologized. You softened the tension. You filled the silence. And even when they pulled away, you pulled harder. Not because you were weak, but because you cared. Because connection mattered to you. For the avoidant, this became the unspoken contract. They could retreat, and you would always be the one to bridge the gap. It wasn't that they consciously wanted to use you. It's that their nervous system was wired to expect pursuit. Your effort reassured them, even if they acted like they didn't want it. Your chase gave them control. Your words, your energy, your fight for closeness, all of it created a buffer that allowed them to keep feeling safe, even while distancing themselves. But when you stop, when you decide to no longer run after them, it's like pulling the ground out from under their feet. They expected space, but not this kind of space. Not silence that stays silent. Not distance that isn't measured by how quickly you close it. At first, they tell themselves a story. She's just upset. He's just cooling off. They'll come around. They always do. That's the script they rely on. It calms their fear. It reassures their fragile balance. But as the hours turn into days, and the days into weeks, that story begins to crack. Your absence becomes undeniable. Their confidence in your pursuit turns into doubt. And doubt, for the avoidant, is dangerous because beneath all their distance, beneath their calm exterior, they carry a deep and hidden fear. The fear of being abandoned. This fear doesn't come out clean. It comes out twisted. It comes out sideways. It shows up as irritation, as anger, as dismissiveness. But in truth, when you stop chasing, you press on the wound they've hidden their entire lives. The wound of being left. The wound of being unwanted. Your silence speaks louder than any argument. It tells them, I am no longer available to carry this relationship alone. And this hits them in a way they cannot admit. On the surface, they may smirk. They may shrug. They may tell their friends how dramatic you are or how clingy you were. But behind closed doors, in their quiet moments, they feel it. The loss, the shift in power, the unsettling awareness that maybe they pushed too far. See, avoidants are not immune to the bonds they form. They feel connection deeply, but it terrifies them. So they build walls, and they convince themselves that walls protect them from pain. What they don't realize, until you stop chasing, is that the walls don't just keep you out. They trap them inside, alone, cut off, disconnected. And when you walk away, they are forced to sit inside the walls they built, with no one banging on the outside, no one reminding them they are wanted. For many avoidants, this is the first time they taste the consequences of their withdrawal, and it rattles them. Because the truth is, your chasing always cushioned their fear. It reassured them that no matter how far they pulled back, you would come closer. Without that cushion, their world feels unstable. They may try to cover it up, distracting themselves, throwing themselves into work, leaning on casual interactions, or even acting colder than ever. But none of it hides the truth. The moment you stop chasing is the moment they realize they've lost control. For the avoidant, control has always been the survival mechanism. Control of distance, control of pace, control of how much intimacy is safe. But your silence dismantles that. Because now, the distance isn't theirs to decide. Now, the silence belongs to you. And this terrifies them more than closeness ever did, because it means you hold the power they thought they could always keep. And deep down, they feel something they rarely let themselves feel: regret. Not regret in the sense that they'll come running back, arms open, ready to bare their soul. No, that would require a level of vulnerability they aren't yet ready for. But regret in the sense that the fantasy of endless pursuit is broken. The comfort of your presence is gone. The illusion that they can keep you at a distance, yet never lose you, has shattered. This is where the panic begins. A panic they don't want to name. A panic that tells them they might not come back. They might have truly let go. They might have realized their worth. And if there's one thing an avoidant cannot easily face, it's the idea of someone choosing themselves over the chase. That's the moment they start to spin. Because losing you isn't just about losing a partner. It's about losing the fragile balance that's kept them safe from their fears. And now, for the first time, they're the ones left wondering, will they reach out? Will they chase me again? Or is this silence the end? And the truth is, that silence has already done its work, because it forces them to face what they've run from all along. Not you, not love, but themselves. The subtle games of pull and push. When silence lingers, the avoidant begins to stir. At first, it's confusion. They wonder why you haven't reached out, why the script feels broken, why the rhythm isn't what it used to be. But confusion quickly shifts into something more strategic. Because for the avoidant, silence is never neutral. It's a challenge, a disruption, a threat to the balance they've always relied on. And when that balance cracks, they reach for the tools they've always used: distance, deflection, control. Only this time, those tools don't quite work, because you're not playing your role anymore. So what happens next? They start to test, not in obvious ways at first. An avoidant rarely rushes in with grand gestures of affection. That level of vulnerability feels too risky. Instead, they choose subtler moves, moves that allow them to feel out your resolve without exposing themselves. It might look like a casual text. Hey, how have you been? No depth, no emotion, just enough to see if you'll bite. It might look like a random story they watch on your social media. Silent, but intentional. A way of reminding you they're still orbiting your life. Or it might come as a question through a mutual friend. How are they doing? Have you talked to them lately? On the surface, these actions look harmless. But underneath, they're pressure tests. They want to know, will you break the silence? Will you give in and resume the chase? Because if you do, the balance is restored. They can exhale. They can slip back into the role where you carry the weight, and they control the pace. But if you don't, if you remain steady, if your silence holds, if you continue choosing yourself, that's when the avoidant begins to panic. And panic doesn't always look like panic. It can look like anger. They're ignoring me. They don't care. They've moved on too quickly. It can look like dismissal. See, I knew they were never right for me. They're proving I made the right choice. Or it can look like escalation. Suddenly, they're louder, more dramatic, even provocative. Because if subtle moves don't pull you back, sometimes chaos will. This is where push-pull behaviors emerge. They may throw a breadcrumb of affection, a nostalgic memory, a compliment, a sudden message at 2 a.m. But the moment you lean in, the moment you soften, they pull away again. Because what they crave isn't closeness, it's proof of control. See, for the avoidant, love is terrifying because it feels like surrender. To be loved deeply means letting go of their defenses. It means risking the wounds they've spent their entire life avoiding. So instead of surrender, they chase equilibrium. They want just enough closeness to feel secure, but not so much that it threatens their walls. And your silence, your refusal to chase, it dismantles this equilibrium. So they reach for what feels safe. Games of pull and push. Games where they can monitor your reaction without showing their own. But here's the twist. The longer you hold your ground, the more exhausting these games become. Because deep down, the avoidant isn't playing just with you. They're playing with themselves, with their own fear, with the part of them that longs for closeness, and the part that runs from it. Your silence throws them into a war they've been fighting all along. A war between longing and fear, between desire and defense, between connection and control. And in that war, every move they make isn't really about you. It's about testing themselves. Can they handle losing you? Can they endure the void your absence leaves? Or will their fear of abandonment finally overpower their fear of closeness? This is why so many avoidants spiral when the chase ends, because suddenly they can't hide behind the old patterns. The push doesn't work. The pull doesn't work. The games fall flat. And in that silence, they face a mirror they've avoided their whole life. A mirror that asks, do you want love enough to risk being vulnerable? Do you care enough to step beyond your walls? It's a haunting question, and it doesn't go away. So while they may distract themselves with work, with friends, with new flings, none of it soothes the deeper ache. Because distraction is temporary, but silence is steady. And the steady silence you hold is the one thing they can't easily escape. It forces them to wrestle with what they've always avoided. Not your need, not your pursuit, but their own. Their need for love, their need for safety, their need to finally admit that pushing people away doesn't keep them safe. It keeps them lonely. And so the avoidant, caught in this moment of realization, has two choices. They can double down on the walls, or they can begin, slowly, clumsily, painfully, to question if the walls were ever worth it. That choice won't be clear yet. Not in this stage. At this stage, they're still testing, still pushing, still pulling. But the seed of awareness is planted, and your silence is the soil it grows in. The fear behind the mask. On the surface, an avoidant looks calm, detached, unbothered, even free. They might act like your silence doesn't matter, like they're relieved, like you walking away was what they wanted all along. But beneath that mask, there's a storm, because when the chasing stops, something terrifying happens. They lose the very thing that kept them safe, the illusion of control. See, as long as you were chasing, they got to decide the terms. How much closeness? How much distance? When to respond? When to disappear? They got to hold the power. And power, to an avoidant, feels like protection. But when you stop chasing, that power slips. And the feeling it leaves behind isn't freedom, it's exposure. Suddenly, they feel seen, not for the mask they wear, but for the fear they hide. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of being loved so deeply that leaving would destroy them. And here's the paradox. They've spent their entire life building walls to avoid this fear. Yet when you step back, that fear rushes in anyway. They start asking themselves questions they don't want to face. Why does their silence bother me this much? Why do I care when I swore I didn't? Why do I feel both angry and desperate at the same time? These questions are cracks in the armor, because the truth is, avoidants aren't immune to love. They're not cold-hearted. They're not incapable of feeling. In fact, they often feel more deeply than they'll ever admit. That's why they run. That's why they shut down. That's why they keep people at arm's length. Feeling deeply is dangerous to them. It reminds them of old wounds, moments of rejection, moments when their needs weren't met, moments when love came with pain. So instead of leaning in, they learn to pull away, not because they don't care, but because caring feels unsafe. And when your silence arrives, when you stop chasing, it reactivates those old wounds. It feels like abandonment. It feels like loss. It feels like being that child again, who wanted closeness, but learned it was dangerous. Only this time, there's no one to blame but themselves. And that's the part that cuts the deepest. Because for the first time, they can't say, "You were too much." They can't say, "You smothered me." They can't say, "I had no space." All they can see is the quiet truth. You stopped chasing because they pushed you too far. And in that realization, their mask begins to crack. Some avoidants respond with anger. They lash out. They throw accusations. They rewrite the story in their head to paint you as the one at fault, because anger feels safer than grief. Others respond with withdrawal. They go silent, disappear into work, distract themselves with flings or hobbies, anything to avoid feeling the ache. But no matter the response, the ache doesn't go away. It lingers. It follows them. It whispers in the quiet moments. Because the truth is, your silence isn't just silence. It's a mirror, a reflection of everything they've avoided. It forces them to confront the emptiness behind the mask, the loneliness hiding beneath their independence, the longing beneath their detachment. And this is the cost they never want to admit. Yes, they protect themselves from pain. Yes, they avoid the risk of rejection. But in doing so, they also avoid love. They also avoid joy. They also avoid the very connection their heart secretly craves. So when you stop chasing, you don't just withdraw your presence. You withdraw their shield. You leave them face to face with the very truth they run from, that their walls keep them safe, but they also keep them alone. And here's the irony. They may try to convince themselves that they're fine, that they don't need you, that independence is enough. But at night, when the world is quiet, when the distractions fade, the truth presses in. They miss you, not because you chased, but because your silence forced them to feel. And feeling, though terrifying, is the one thing they can't escape. This is the moment where the avoidant faces the edge. Do they double down on their defenses, or do they begin to question them? Either way, your silence is the turning point, the crack in the mask, the shift in the story. And for the first time, the power isn't in their hands. It's in yours, not because you're controlling them, but because you chose yourself. And that choice is the one thing they never expected, the push and pull of their next move. When your silence settles in, an avoidant doesn't just sit with it. They react. But their reaction is rarely direct. It's rarely clear. It's rarely what you'd expect. Because the moment they realize you stop chasing, they're caught in a storm of two competing forces, the part of them desperate for closeness and the part of them terrified by it. This is the push and pull that defines the avoidant heart. On one hand, your absence stings. It makes them wonder if they've finally lost the one person who saw through their walls. It makes them crave you. It makes them want to reach out. But on the other hand, reaching out feels like surrender. It feels like admitting they need someone. And for an avoidant, needing someone has always felt like weakness. So instead of coming straight to you, they test the waters. They might send a vague message, something small, something safe, a meme, a question that doesn't matter. A simple, hey, it looks casual, but underneath, it's loaded with meaning. It's their way of asking, are you still there? Will you respond? Do I still have a place in your life? Because as much as they run from love, they fear being forgotten even more. Other times, they won't reach out directly. Instead, they'll appear on the edges of your world, liking your posts, watching your stories, asking mutual friends about you, finding little ways to remind you they exist without having to risk too much. It's the avoidance way of staying tethered without stepping too close, because closeness is their trigger, but being erased is their deepest fear. And then there are the avoidants, who react not with quiet touches, but with sudden intensity. They come back strong, calling, texting, making promises, saying things you always wish they'd say. At first, it feels like the breakthrough you've been waiting for. But here's the danger. This intensity often doesn't last. Because once the fear of losing you eases, the fear of closeness rises again, and the cycle repeats, pulling you close, then pushing you away, again and again. Not because they're cruel, not because they're manipulative, but because they're trapped in the prison of their own defenses. And yet, there's another group of avoidants, the ones who double down on silence. They tell themselves, if you're not chasing, I won't move either. It looks like indifference, but it's not. It's fear. Fear that if they reach for you and you don't respond, it will confirm the wound they've carried all along. That love always leaves. So instead, they freeze, paralyzed between wanting you and fearing you. This is why your silence is such a powerful shift. It doesn't just stop the chase, it changes the balance of power. For the first time, the avoidant has to feel what it's like to be on the other side. They get a taste of their own withdrawal, and what once felt safe to them now feels like loss. It's unsettling. It's destabilizing. It's the very thing they've been running from all along. And here's the truth. Not every avoidant will face this moment the same way. Some will finally confront their fear. They'll recognize the cost of their distance. They'll realize that love can't survive on half measures. Others will retreat even deeper into their walls, convincing themselves they never needed you anyway. But no matter how they respond, your silence changes the story. Because for once, they can't blame the dynamic on your pursuit. They can't say you pushed too hard. They can't accuse you of overwhelming them. All that's left is the reality of their own defenses and the cost of keeping them. So when an avoidant realizes you stopped chasing their next move, whether it's a breadcrumb, a sudden surge of affection, or a deeper retreat, isn't really about you. It's about their battle with themselves, their longing against their fear, their heart against their armor. And while you may not see it, this is often the moment that cracks their story wide open. Because in the quiet, in the space your silence creates, they're forced to face the truth they've been running from all along. That love isn't the enemy. That closeness isn't the trap. That the walls they built for safety are the very thing keeping them from the connection they crave. And this realization, as painful as it is the beginning of change. Not always today, not always tomorrow, but one day, when the walls feel heavier than the risk, they'll remember this moment. The moment your silence spoke louder than all your words ever could. When the silence becomes the teacher. At first, your silence unsettles them. It feels foreign. It feels wrong. It feels like the rules of the dance have changed. But over time, your silence does something deeper. It teaches, because avoidants spend their lives believing love equals pressure, believing closeness equals danger, believing distance equals safety. And then you stop chasing. You don't push. You don't beg. You don't demand. You simply step back. And suddenly, their beliefs are tested. Without the chase, their story unravels. If love was really suffocating, why does its absence feel so heavy? If distance was really safety, why does it ache so much now? If they didn't need you, why do they notice every moment you're gone? These are the questions that echo in the silence, the questions they can't escape. And this is why your silence isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's the mirror they've been avoiding. It's the reflection they've been hiding from. Of course, not every avoidant will learn the lesson. Some will run harder. Some will double down on their walls. Some will convince themselves that numbness is strength. But for others, the silence becomes a turning point, a crack in the story, a shift in the script, a chance to see that love was never the enemy. Because the truth is, your silence doesn't just take away the chase. It takes away the illusion that their defenses were working. And once that illusion breaks, they're left with the truth. That running doesn't protect them. It only isolates them. This realization is both painful and powerful. Painful because it forces them to face all the years of pushing people away, all the missed chances, all the loneliness they pretended was freedom. Powerful because it plants a seed that says, maybe love doesn't have to hurt. Maybe closeness can be safe. Maybe walls aren't the only way to survive. And here's where you come in. Not as the one who breaks their walls for them. Not as the one who proves their fears wrong. Not as the one who sacrifices yourself just to hold them together. But as the one who chose yourself. Who chose peace over chaos. Who chose presence over chasing. Who chose to stop running after someone who only knew how to run away. Your silence teaches them something you could never teach with words. That love doesn't chase. That real connection doesn't beg. That your worth isn't measured by how hard you fight for someone who won't fight for you. And maybe, just maybe, they'll carry that lesson forward into their next chapter, into their healing, into the day when they finally decide that distance isn't strength and vulnerability isn't weakness. But even if they don't, your silence already did the work. It freed you. It gave you back your energy. It put the story in your hands. Because at the end of the day, you were never meant to chase someone into loving you. You were meant to love someone who meets you halfway. So if you're listening to this right now, and you've been chasing, and you've been waiting, and you've been exhausting yourself, trying to hold it all together, let this be your reminder. Your silence is not punishment. It's power. It's the moment you show that your love is valuable, that your energy is sacred, that your worth was never meant to be proven by running after someone who was always running away. And if this resonates with you, if it feels like I just told your story, remember this: you're not alone in it. So many people are caught in the same dance, the same chase, the same heartbreak. But healing starts when you choose yourself. And sometimes that starts with silence. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden patterns of love, connection, and attachment, make sure you subscribe, because there's so much more we're going to uncover together.